Hello and welcome to Media 7. This is the last of our summer editions coming to you from Artisan Winery. Today we are talking about the way the media reports far-off and deeply felt conflicts. Here is a quick look at some of the reporting coming out of the Israeli-Gaza situation. The Israeli invasion of Gaza is the latest in thousands of years of ethnic, religious and political conflicts in the Middle East. In some ways, television is a medium that conveys best the realities of war, the horror and the fallout. But in areas like the Middle East, how can a minute-and-a-half report hope to cover 2 millennia of context and history?
The rockets just landed over there, about a couple of hundred yards away.
How does the New Zealand media explain and analyse deep-seated difference in a way we can understand? It isn't just the players. If you're putting together the news, how would you choose to introduce a story from, say, Fox News, which follows the US government line, versus a story from Al Jazeera, which doesn't? Even the reporting is political. Then there is the danger and difficulty. We're used to seeing reporters in flak jackets, but it's helpful to know that they aren't playing dress-up. It's often an insurance requirement. And on top of all this, what's to be done when one side of the conflict won't let reporters in?
Israeli military have banned international media from entering Gaza, so this hill, about a kilometre away from the border, is about as close as we can get. And it's turned into something of a grandstand on the war.
And as TV1's Mark Kreisel also says, the very reporting becomes part of propaganda battles.
Footage like this is playing a major part in the negotiations. This is a PR battle as much as it is a military one. It's those images that are helping to drive the peace process.
Joining us for an insight into how TV news decisions are made on such a contentious issue is One News editor Paul Patrick, and back for a second week running, Angus Gillies, TV3 news producer. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.
That's fine.
Now, Paul, if I can start with you. How do you prepare personnel for going into the field in far-off conflict zones?
Well, TVNZ's got quite a elaborate and highly used system where we put people through hostile training courses. We have anyone who wants to go into difficult areas always has that training. Includes teamwork. There's four-wheel drive courses because you never know when you might have to get out of somewhere quickly. We also provide important things like survival packs, which has food, cooking equipment, all that sort of thing, so that people, when they go into these places, if there's no running water or no food, they can use that material. And also, obviously, we have flak jackets because you just don't know when you're going to need to have those. People have worn those in East Timor, they've worn them in Gaza, in Israel, and in other conflicts where we send people to.
It sounds quite exciting, but it's very dangerous, isn't it, really?
Well, yeah, and I think that most people don't actually know what it's going to be like until they actually go to a place, and everyone's different, so different people react differently when they get sent into those areas. Sometimes they really enjoy it and they get a kick out of it. Others get a little bit nervous and they want to have the support from home, which we want to provide for them when they're in a difficult area.
What do you have to do for those people as the home support?
Well, when you're basically listening to them. If they've had a really tough day in the field, you want to be on the end of the phone and be able to listen to them tell you their stories about how difficult it was, how close the bullets went, or how high the rockets were, and how they're missing mum or whatever. All that kind of stuff. You don't want to. You want to be able to. That you want them to feel that they have the support of the people back in New Zealand, because they're doing a tough job.
With this conflict that we've just seen in Gaza, the reporters haven't actually been allowed into the war zones. What are your thoughts on that?
Gaza is a really, really dangerous place, and in fact I don't believe there has been a Western news organisation in Gaza for some years, since Steve Santani and Olaf Wigg were kidnapped a few years ago. And I think that an organisation like TVNZ doesn't have the resources that, say, the BBC or CNN to put a whole group of security and personnel into Gaza unless we are able to go in there with a pool arrangement, which is, my understanding is that the BBC and CBS and other Western organisations over the last couple of days have been able to do.
What are your thoughts, Angus? I mean, the reason that we have you back here a second week running is because you are night after night on TV3 at the moment, making these news decisions. What do you feel about the way reporters are banned from getting into Gaza?
Well, I think it's just a reality. I mean, Israel isn't letting reporters into Gaza, and there's nothing you can do about that. We haven't had a reporter over in Gaza. We've been relying on international coverage. We've been getting really good coverage from ITV, and we'd probably rate ITV's coverage and the reporters that are covering the Middle East, the best in the world. And it's probably consistently better than what we're getting from the American agencies. And Julian Mannion's a reporter, and he has been around the Middle East a long time, and he's very good. We've had a couple of live crosses from the Middle East since the whole thing began, one on the first day, one a bit further into.
Let's look at those live crosses. I mean, you TV3 are sending over Mike Roberts at the moment, and TVNZ have Mark Kreisel there. I mean, what for the man on the street looking and seeing these people doing the live crosses from the hill, but not actually being in there and then playing footage they receive from reports, could people just ask why bother having them there?
Well, we've had our 2 live crosses from inside Gaza. We've got hold of a guy, because the first day it happened we got a live cross from inside Gaza, from Gaza City, a journalist called Al-Naja Zuhair. And he is there. He's not a very clipped professional TV journalist. He's more a producer. He's able to talk about what it's like underneath the bombs, particularly on that first day when there's about 100 tons of bombs dropped on Gaza. And so he's been really good in that regard. There has been no way of getting inside Gaza for Western journalists since then. Now that there has been the unilateral ceasefire, and now Hamas have got on board as well, there may be more chance of getting in there, and Mike McRoberts and John Stevenson and Michael Acosta cameraman are all heading over there.
Well, Mark Kreisel's been there for 3 weeks, and by having a New Zealand journalist there for the last 3 weeks has allowed us to actually go and see some New Zealanders who are based in Israel. Mark did a story with a woman in the kibbutz who is hearing the shells every day, has lived in that situation. It allows a New Zealand perspective to appear that you don't get from ITV. We have the best of the BBC that we can also pull on, and the agency footage, but having our own person there allows us to tell you what's going on as it happens. On Sunday night, the Israelis broke the ceasefire with rockets while we were on air, so we were able to cross back to Mark Kreisel a couple of times during the news hour to tell people the very latest. So you saw helicopters flying over the Gaza Strip, you saw some of the flares dropping off, which, as Mark described at that time, was all about warning people that there were going to be some rockets fired. So the benefit of having a New Zealand journalist or your own journalist there is to actually allow us to tell New Zealand stories where we can, but also bring us the latest stuff, which you can't get when you're relying on international journalists.
Let's look at the international coverage that you are having to run for the bulk of your stuff coming out of Gaza. How do you make your decisions? Which we start with you, Angus. How do you make your decisions on what to run? You must see some tremendously gruesome images, and we've seen gruesome images on the news. Where's the line on what you can show?
There is no line. Well, there is a line, and if you cross it, you'll get a BSA complaint. But there is no line, and Paul will know that what comes through the foreign desk occasionally, and we've all seen it over the years, you see some horrific, gruesome footage from all sorts of places that you wouldn't even dream of, showing people. I think there's the line is further, say, for Nightline or for the late news on One as well. I mean, you can probably get away with more graphic pictures later at night, but I think you've just got to be realistic and have a bit of common sense about it. I mean, if someone's looking for the rubbish tin in the foreign news department because they're feeling sick, don't go there, and I think you have to be aware, would you be comfortable with your own family watching this? I mean, how would you feel about this? It's a knee-jerk reaction, really.
Yeah, I've worked at a TV news agency where our rule of thumb was that you allowed the broadcaster to decide what to broadcast, that an agency isn't the censor. So you filed off pictures that were that may have been very, very distressing, and you let the broadcaster decide what to do with it. Angus is quite right. Some of the stuff that you get in on the agencies could never be broadcast on at 6 o'clock. So you make a valid judgment, and he's quite right again, there is no line.
With the images, I mean, I feel that I've seen stronger images of destruction, injured children, death, desolation of the Palestinian people here than I would if they were New Zealanders in a similar attack. Is there a difference between what you would show? We
haven't had a situation like this. You know, we've never had to make that decision, I suppose. But yeah, I think you are much more sensitive if there are New Zealanders involved, and the decisions are much harder if there are New Zealanders are involved. If it's a tragedy that's happened here, if I don't know, if it's an earthquake or something like that, you would have to be much more careful, because you know, people would be outside the doors of the building protesting straight away.
There's nothing quite like having someone's auntie or someone's cousin on TV, or their sister or their brother. In New Zealand, you end up with that's a much more common thing. If you have a disaster here, you've got to think all the time that so-and-so's mum or brother or sister could see those pictures. The foreign conflict, it's not nearly so much of a concern.
And being so far away, it's so political. Even the reporting is political. Is there a difference in what you would, how you would introduce and how you would use a story from, say, Al Jazeera versus, say, Fox News, and why?
Well, probably neither of us would use stories from Al Jazeera or Fox News, because they're the opposite ends of the spectrum, and most of the agencies we would use would be more in the middle. But I think if you saw something and maybe its news value was that it was so extreme, you might, you know, introduce it that way.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, we have competing, the two networks have competing networks that provide us with foreign content. We have the BBC and ABC America, and TV3 has ITN and CBS. So you've got we're not often competing for the same material as such. We have different
they're both
versions.
In that middle, more
Correct.
context balanced kind of
and
way.
one thing that we have to bear in mind too, Simon, is like, you don't want to sanitise what's happening over there. You want people to be shocked and outraged a little bit. You don't want to present war as it isn't. You want to present war as it is, and so that people are thinking about the reality of the situation as opposed to, you know, some sanitised version of it.
That's the great power of TV, isn't it? As a last point from both of you, I mean, what happens when the images that are so affecting overwhelm the context and the dry political details? Because you've got such a short amount of time, a minute and a half, to tell a story, and in some of these conflicts there's millennia of troubles behind it.
Yeah, I think though that when you're talking about a story about war, what's happening on the ground is the most important thing. So if people are dying on the ground, that has to be more important than diplomatic things that are going on to one side. As a television medium, the pictures are what you want to see, and so if it's chaos on the ground, that is always going to be first and foremost what you want to see. The political stuff is an important part of the story, but it's not the first part. It's a secondary. Yeah.
And how do you get that context in?
Well, the thing is, I agree with Paul that context and rationale and history and all that pale into insignificance when, you know, you see pictures of children being blown up, because, you know, we're all kids or we're all adults or we're all parents, and I think when people see the real human toll that comes with war, the other stuff, you kind of got to make the other stuff work to stop that from happening again.
And we've been quite insistent over the past 3 weeks to make sure that in our intros we are telling people how many people have died each day, that the toll is higher, that here's the death toll, because ultimately, you know, people are dying, and it's our job to tell New Zealand audience how many people there are, you know.
Well, thank you, Paul Patrick and Angus Gillies, for a really fascinating discussion there. We'll take a break now and be back soon to talk about getting viewpoints out through the media with David Swartz and John Minto.